Is this clean? Yes, I do realize that this half of my face is covered by shadows, but there's nothing I can do about it, so we're gonna have to deal with it. Well, hello there, welcome back. It's been a while. Today I'm here to talk to you a little bit about the best books I read in 2020. 2020 was actually a very good reading year for me. I read a lot more than I usually do. I mean, I suppose it had to be a good year for something. And you know, reading was one of the few things that kept me going during this shit show of a year. But I also read some very bad books. Most of the books that I read during 2020 I actually liked or loved, but I disliked a lot more books than I usually do in a typical year. Does that make sense? I don't think it does. I have 9 books to talk about, and I'm gonna go from the least worst to the most worst. Yes, I do realize that least worst is not actually a term, but we're gonna go with it. I'm not gonna say I'm gonna go from the best to the worst, because let's be real, none of them were actually good enough to be the best at anything. So coming up at number 9 we have Tell Me Again How a Crush Should Feel by pseudo-feminist. This follows Layla, the daughter of 2 Persian immigrants in the US, and she recently realized she was a lesbian. So she's very worried about what her family's reaction to that would be, especially considering how traditional her parents are, and she's also very thankful that she doesn't have a crush on anyone at school. That is, until new girl Saskia shows up. I think before anything else I have to say that I understand that I'm not the target demographic for this book. I mean, the writing in it is very juvenile, and my problem with it is partly because I am just too old for this style. But it's also that I don't think it's very good even for a younger demographic, to be honest. Have I read this when I was the same age as the main character, I would still have found it quite juvenile. Like, there's fart jokes in it. The writing is my biggest gripe at this book, but there's also quite a few very problematic lines that are never questioned. There's some fatphobic content. There's a teacher at one point who says that she wishes she was a lesbian just because men are awful. And other such gems. There were some good things about it, like I genuinely felt for Layla and her struggle with her sexuality and with coming out, more specifically. I also really liked her relationship with her family and how it evolved and changed throughout the story, as well as the whole deconstruction of Saskia's character and the exploration of toxic friendships / relationships. And I thought the endgame relationship was cute. But overall, I just didn't gel with this book at all. Number 8, Water's Rise by Renee Watson and Ellen Hagen. This book follows 2 teenage girls who go to a very progressive school, and they start noticing some inconsistencies in the school's morals and activism. They basically start noticing how performative the activism of this particular school is, because even though they claim to be very inclusive and progressive and all that, they don't really practice what they preach. And all that kind of prompts the 2 of them to start a feminist club at the school. And we basically read about their journey with that. There's not really a huge plot going on other than that. I really wanted to like this book. I think it has its heart in the right place. I mean, it's the only one out of the feminist YA books that I know of to consider at least a little bit of intersectionality. Like, it talks about race and it talks about body shaming and being fat as well as being a woman, which is nice. Like, the overall message of the book is quite good and positive. I think my biggest problem with this book is that I despised one of the main characters. I liked one of them, you know, Jasmine. I liked her character. I liked the discussion she brought to the table. And above all that, I just really liked her relationship with her father and the exploration of grief and of having a loved one being very sick. The other main character, Chelsea, she can choke. I found her unbearable. Whenever I got to one of her chapters, my immediate reaction was always, no, please God, no. Please. She was extremely annoying. I remember this one bit where she goes on and on and on about how there are no Disney princesses that look like her, when she is a white, cisgender, able-bodied, skinny woman. But no, you see, there are no Disney princesses that look like her because she has frizzy hair. I swear to God. She, this white girl, is the only one in the novel who calls herself a womanist when womanism is about black women. She also says by the end of the novel that the appropriate term is actually woman. I think that's how you're supposed to say that. Omyn, which is literally a turf term. And there's this bit where she literally brags to her sister that she not only participates in Christmas and celebrates Christmas, but also Hanukkah and Kwanzaa as well. Despite the fact that she doesn't participate in any rituals or celebrations or festivities of any of the religions in question, and also doesn't know anything about any of the celebrations beyond the 3 first lines of a Google search. There's also the fact that this book reads like it was written by a fucking alien. It honestly seems to me that the authors never interacted with another human being before, because every single character sounds like a robot. All of them. The impression I got was that the authors sat down, wrote a few feminist bullet points, then wrote a sermon about each of them, and then wrote a book around those sermons. Like, they created all these very unrealistic situations where the main characters could just word vomit the entirety of their feminist speeches out of nowhere, might I add. It was so preachy. It was so very preachy, and it was like every now and then there was this pause where the book would stop being a book and just became a feminist lecture, and like not even a very good one at that. Listen, I'm an intersectional feminist. I am all for feminism being incorporated into stories, but it needs to be actually incorporated. It needs to be well integrated into story, you know? It needs to be natural. In this, it was just very clear to me that these situations were written around previously written feminist speeches, if that makes sense. Also, I take huge issue with the fact that this book claims to be intersectional, yet never brings up disability or queerness or just anything in relation to being transgender, for example. On top of that, there's also the way the book used the terms "I'm with her" and "say her name" very out of context. Like, "say her name" is for black women who are victims of police brutality / anti-black violence, and "I'm with her" was a slogan, I believe, of the Hillary Clinton presidential campaign. And in this book, they would just be used as kind of a term to uplift the artistic work of some women. No. I think the "I'm with her" would be okay, just because, you know, who cares about Hillary Clinton's failed presidential campaign? But taking "say her name," which is specifically about the violence inflicted upon black women, especially by police, it's no, don't do that. And of course, none of this is ever addressed in the book, so I'll link a great Goodreads review down below about this book that just explains all my problems with it better than I ever could, so please check it out, I guess. Number 7 is The Lactobar by Anne Gretsch. Sometimes I just consider deleting my first Quest for the Best video, because I feel so differently about all those books now, except for 3 by Hannah Moscovitz. That one is very good. But like, all the other ones on this list, I really don't like them. I feel very differently about them now. This follows 3 friends, 2 of whom are a couple. You know, one of the men and the woman are a couple, but the 3 of them have feelings for one another, and they have had those feelings for a very long time. But they were always afraid of admitting it, even to themselves, let alone to actually explore those feelings. So the third party, you know, the other man, I'm sorry, I don't remember any of the names. So yeah, the older man decides to basically run away from his feelings, you know, towards his friends and from this entire situation, and just try to move on with his life. But the way he goes about that is by joining the fucking army. The book starts when this character comes back after being discharged and goes to live with the other 2 for a while. First things first, this book came off as very pro-military to me, which
That's gonna be a fucking yikes for me, holy shit.
It very much seemed to imply that the soldiers were fighting the good fight for good and freedom and all that propaganda bullshit. Which honestly surprised me, because this takes place in Australia, and I didn't know that Australia was like this with the military. I thought this was a US thing only. The soldier character, I think his name is Connor, if I'm not mistaken. He was diagnosed with PTSD, but his condition only shows up a few times throughout the story, and it's usually because it serves the plot, and that's that. Like, I know this is a romance novel and his mental illness would not be the focus of the story, but at the same time, nobody forced you to make your character mentally ill. If you're gonna add this to the story, you have to do it well and responsibly and with respect. My biggest problem with this book, though, was the writing. I think we have a recurring theme here. The story in and of itself was fine enough, it could have been a decent book, but the writing was so fucking bad. Most things were just summarized, if that makes sense. Like, instead of showing a scene when the soldier character went to therapy, for example, and, us reading that scene and how it played out and reading the conversation and all that would instead be just a summary of it. Like, his therapist told him to do that and that whenever that happened, instead of actually writing that happening. Things were told rather than shown, is what I mean. But even beyond that, the writing was just bad. It was very repetitive for one. Like, the two dudes would always refer to each other as his best mate, and the woman would always refer to her boyfriend as her man. There was also an overuse of worshipping her body. I swear to God, every other line we were reminded that the two guys were best mates. Like, we get it. You can stop throwing that shit on my face now, please. Thank you. It was uncreative, it was dry, and sometimes it was just downright cringy. Examples of the latter include, but are not limited to, Connor always calling the woman Cupcake. Always. Like, even when they are both on ass fucking. Like, it's so real. One of the characters calls vibrators Vibes, which was a choice. And of course, my personal favorite, one of the characters plays Wonderwall by Oasis, and it's supposed to be taken seriously.
Anyway, here's Wonderwall.
I kid you not, it was supposed to be this very touching and bonding moment between the three main characters, and I couldn't stop fucking laughing because he was playing Wonderwall by Oasis. You can't make the shit up. Today is gonna be the day of Number 6, Rule of 3 by Kelly Jamieson. This follows another group of 3 people, 2 of whom, one of the man and the woman, being a couple. Sounds familiar. In this one, the 2 guys are best friends in college, and they used to have threesomes with other women together. Now, one of the guys is in a relationship with a woman, and the other, the best friend, comes over to visit, and the 3 of them start having threesomes together, basically. And eventually they also start having feelings for one another. I'm gonna be very honest with you. I came to understand that I am non-monogamous not too long ago, and when I read Rule of 3 as well as the Lactobar, I was just very starved for non-monogamous representation. So I was just very excited to find any, and I was very happy with whatever crumbs of representation I was given, because I just thought there weren't any stories like these out there, Since then, I came to find out that there are actually a lot of stories like this, especially in the indie romance market. And I personally found some great polyamorous stories and fanfiction. I think fanfiction is really the gold mine for polyamory. And so the more I think about these 2 books, the more I realize how they weren't actually good in the first place. In both of these, as well as many others that I read in the meantime, it's always a hetero cisgender couple and a cisgender male best friend, and the 2 guys have been secretly in love and lusting for one another all those years. So the 3 of them start fucking, but it's always focused on the woman, like the 2 guys sharing the woman and taking the woman, because obviously the guys don't want to admit they're not straight yet. And eventually the guy who is in a relationship with the woman gives in to his desires and feels immediately ashamed. Miscommunication ensue. The guy who's in a couple will start thinking that his girlfriend doesn't want him anymore because being fucked by a man is emasculating. The guy who's not in the couple is gonna start worrying that he's destroying the relationship. And the woman, of course, will think that now that the 2 guys have finally accepted that they love each other / wanna fuck each other, that they won't want her anymore. Even though she has feelings for both of them, it doesn't cross her mind at any point that they might have feelings for her, the 2 of them, while still loving each other. This is the story in so many of these books, and I am tired. They always come off as very fetishizing, especially in regards to the 2 men who are involved, and I honestly feel bad that it took me so long to see that. Other than that, it's just not well written. Also, one of the male main characters is a named Rant stan. Kelly Jamieson, please stop adding details to this character because I already hated him. and you're just making it worse. Number 5, Downtown Devil by Kara Makina. I'm gonna be honest with y'all, I don't remember a whole lot about this one. Probably a defense mechanism now that I think about it. It follows a woman who is a photographer and she approaches this guy to invite him to be a part of a project of hers. He accepts, the two of them get acquainted and eventually start having sex. This dude lives with his male best friend, and you already see where this is going, right? Soon the three of them start having sex together, yada yada, you get the gist by now. My problem with this book was consent, or lack thereof, but I want to preface that by saying that I am not opposed to dubious consent being included in works of fiction. However, the way it happened in this particular book was an all-around no-no for me. Maybe this would be considered spoilers, but I honestly don't think you should care. Also, I'm going to talk about issues of consent and sexual assault in the next few minutes, so if that is potentially triggering for you, just skip to this timestamp. So the two male characters met when they were both teenagers in this program that offered climbing lessons, I think, to children in need and children of underprivileged backgrounds. The two of them became best friends, and when they grew up and eventually moved to different cities, they kept meeting once every year to climb together. And eventually they start a sexual relationship, and I put sexual relationship in quotations because whenever the two of them engage in sexual activities, it's only after the photograph guy really pressured the other guy into it. And when the book starts, the guy in the photographs is living with his best friend for just a few months, and the best friend made it abundantly clear that he did not want to have sex with this guy anymore. Now fast forward to when photo guy and photographer girl start fucking. He is the one to proposition a threesome with his best friend to her, who again had already told him he did not want to have sex with him anymore. So yeah, he propositions the girl to have a threesome with his best friend who does not want to fuck him. Also, he does it when the guy is in the room with them. And he keeps bringing it up until he gets a response from the girl. And she says yes, but like, the road to that yes is very questionable. Anyway, long story short, photograph guy is emotionally invested in his best friend, who is emotionally invested in photographer girl, who is emotionally invested in photograph guy. So, you know, not a very healthy concoction. They basically keep having threesomes just because photograph guy keeps bringing it up and just pressuring the two of them into it. Because he keeps using the threesomes to keep on having sex with his best friend who doesn't want to have sex with him. Also, the best friend says, to the very end, that he's straight. And supposedly photograph guy is the only man he's ever been interested in.
But imagine how tired we are. Imagine how tired we are of it.
Again, this is all very fetishizing of the two male characters, and it's some gay for you shit. And all the consent comes from coercion and manipulation, which, spoiler alert, that's not consent. And this is never addressed properly in the novel, you know, there are no repercussions for it, and it's treated as just this guy being this guy, it's just the way he is, you know, and the other male character just convinces himself in the end that he wanted it all along, and it's just very sad to read. I hated it, it was just very upsetting to me, and I hated it. I really hated it. I love how I started the section saying that I don't remember anything about the book and then proceeded to have a full-on rant about it. Number 4 is From Lokov with Love by Mariana Zapata. Please don't kill me. This follows, what's her name? Jasmine, I think. Jasmine is a 26-year-old professional figure skater. She has been skating singles for the longest time, but she never quite made it, you know. She has a rivalry with this male figure skater called Lokov, and he competes in pair skating, so he's always paired up with a female figure skater. And unlike Jasmine, he has won many championships before. The two of them have known each other since they were kids. Ivan's sister is Jasmine's best friend. And the book starts with Jasmine being invited to skate pairs with Ivan, you know, to pair up with him. So the book is about that. I hated this book. Well, hate is a very strong word. I strongly disliked this book. There you go. Which was very surprising to me because everyone seems to love this book. Its rating on Goodreads is quite good, and everyone who reads romance recommended it to me, which was just a bit frustrating because I really expected to love it. It sounds right up my alley. I mean, a slow burn, enemies to lovers between a pair of figure skaters. Sign me the fuck up. In the end, it was just so disappointing, but even beyond my disappointment, I just don't think this book is good. Again, this was pitched to me as a slow burn enemies to lovers romance, which is technically true, except they weren't enemies. They weren't even rivals. The main character is just so fucking childish and self-centered, and her entire family is so fucking childish as well. And to my absolute horror, they were very present in the story. I hated them. And listen, y'all know me. I'm all for characters being flawed, but in this case it doesn't seem like the author or the book even knew that those were flaws in the first place. I mean, they were rarely treated as such in the book, so... And this bitch was 26 years old. Had she been around 20, maybe even a bit younger, I may have been able to understand why she was the way she was. Maybe. Like, it would still be annoying and it would still be a flaw, but I might have been able to cut her some slack. But her being fucking 26 years old and being this fucking childish, it's not cute. It's not cute. And when you find out why she hates this guy so fucking much, it's just so stupid. It's so ridiculous. And it's not that deep. Unbearable. Like, there's this one bit, spoilers, I guess, even though this whole thing is solved almost immediately and it ends up barely mattering at all in the grand scheme of things. But there's this bit where her mother gets in a car accident. She goes to the hospital, the doctor tells her that she's fine, there's nothing really wrong with her, you know, her face is just bruised, but she's fine. So she goes back home and she doesn't tell her children about it because she doesn't want to worry them for nothing. Especially because they are all adults and, you know, they have their own lives and they have work and jobs and all that. And so I understand why her children might be very upset with her because of this and why they might think she is childish or anything like that. But Jasmine somehow ends up making this entire situation about herself. This bitch throws herself the pity party and she starts with this drama of like, oh my god, I am the worst daughter that has ever stepped in this earth because she made her mom think that skating was more important to her than her own mother. And my god, she was just so terrible when her mother had not heard about the accident to any of her children. Like, it wasn't just Jasmine, it was all of them. And her mom is obviously like,
the fuck?
But Jasmine doesn't give a fuck because of course this is about her, you know, everything is about her apparently. And she has this dramatic scene where she just runs away from home and runs away from her mother instead of just listening to her fucking mother and goes to the skating rink and skates until her feet go numb.
But imagine how tired we are.
My god, she was just unbearable. And like, I already have to deal with my fair share of adult children in my work life. I sure as fuck don't want to read about them too. And there's also these weird ass descriptions. I don't know if descriptions is the right word. It's like, you know, when you write a word and you don't want to repeat it because you just used it, so instead you write down a synonym. Like, you just wrote mom and instead of repeating it you replace it with my mother, for example. It's like that, but it's so fucking weird. I'm gonna read you a couple of examples just so you know what I'm talking about. Then, the woman who even with 2 black eyes didn't look like she'd given birth to 5 kids, and definitely didn't look like her youngest, me, was 26 years old, finally did glance in my direction. She wrote all that instead of saying my mom finally glanced in my direction. This one refers to her sister's husband. The blonde beefcake, who I swore could have had a successful career as a gigolo if he hadn't been in the military, held his hand out toward me. This shit happened every other page. Sometimes it happened more than once in a single page. I hate it. It's so fucking weird. However, I did really like the learning disability rep and how it played into the story, I guess you could say. Jasmine has a learning disability and she had to make some accommodations to her skating, you know, because she isn't able to learn anything the same way her peers are, you know, so she had to find out another way that would make her understand the things she needed to understand in order to skate, if that makes sense. And she talks about how difficult school was for her and, you know, her father keeps pressuring her to this day to get into college when, you know, she has made it clear time and time again that doesn't work for her. You know, she is not like that. All of that was super well done, and you know, there were also a few cute scenes, I guess. But overall, I was just so fucking annoyed while reading this, you know. Also, there was only one sex scene. One. And it wasn't even good. Number 3, The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Turton. This is about a man who's stuck reliving the same day over and over again. And every single time he wakes up in the body of a different person who is attending this party where a murder took place. And the only way he can escape this loop is if he solves the murder of Evelyn Hardcastle. So each loop he's got 7 bodies to go through, and if he fails to solve the murder by the 7th, then the loop just starts all over again. And he loses his memories from the previous loop. He basically goes back to 0. I've been meaning to read this book for the longest time. You know, the premise just sounds very interesting to me, and I thought I was really going to like it. There are things about this book that I like. I like the premise. I really liked putting together the pieces of the puzzle and just reading as the story sort of came together and, you know, started making sense. I also really liked that the character was literally reliving the same day over and over again. Like, all of his 7 days were taking place simultaneously, you know, they were the same day. He was just waking up in different bodies, and so he's able to talk to himself in different bodies in this kind of paradoxical way that was actually quite interesting. Does that make sense? That is all. I have no other positives at all. The writing was nothing special, the ending was extremely contrived, and the reason, you know, the explanation that was given for why these characters were stuck in this loop, as well as the explanation of the loop in and of itself, you know, and how it came to be and what it is, was just so fucking stupid. It was ridiculous, it was contrived, it was convoluted. I would rather have no explanation at all than have a bad one like this. Like, seriously. But by far, the worst thing about this book is the extreme fat phobia. And when I say extreme, I mean extreme. One of the bodies the main character wakes up in is the body of a fat man. And the way he talks about it and about living in it was just so fucking disgusting. It's awful, it's extremely fat phobic. It's written in a way that makes it seem like the body is disgusting for being fat, really. And like that body is a prison, and a very disgusting one at that. It made me extremely uncomfortable, being honest with you. And, you know, I've seen quite a lot of people saying that the book and the fat phobia in it was just very triggering for them. You know, keep that in mind if you, for some reason, decide just to check this out. So yeah, in the end, this one was just a miss. Coming up in number 2, America, The Life and Times of America Chavez by Gaby Rivera and Joe Quinones, I think? Yeah, illustrated by Joe Quinones. I honestly don't have a lot to say about this one because I barely understood anything about it in the first place. It was just bad. I honestly didn't know a lot about America Chavez going into this. You know, I knew only that she was Puerto Rican and a lesbian, and that she is one of Kate Bishop's best friends. So I was just excited to read about a Marvel superhero who is a queer Latinx woman just like me. And she is Afro-Latinx, which is great as well. And you know, Kate Bishop is one of my favorite comic book characters of all time. I adore her. So I just thought, if America Chavez is one of Kate Bishop's best friends, then there's no way she's a bad character, right? I don't even know how to explain this one, to be honest with you, so I'm just gonna read the synopsis of it. She was a young Avenger, she leads the Ultimates, and now she officially claims her place as the preeminent butt kicker of the entire Marvel universe. But what's a superpowered teenager to do when she's looking for a little personal fulfillment? She goes to college. I mean, that's a choice. America just has to stop an interdimensional monster or two first and shut down a pesky alien cult that's begun worshipping her exploits before work can begin. But then she can get on with her first assignment, a field trip to the front lines of World War II, with Captain America as a wingman. The story in this was so fucking convoluted and poorly explained when it was explained at all. I barely understood a single thing. It was a nonsensical mess. The writing was just so fucking cringy, and I hated every second I spent reading this comic. Also, the art in one of the issues is just so fucking ugly. Like, I know art and beauty are very subjective things, but come on. Like, seriously. Disgusting! And finally, the worst book of 2020, the creme de la crepe, #1, Sweet Tooth by Ian McEwan. If you've been here for any amount of time, then chances are you know of my absolute hatred and distaste for this book, because I have been very loud about it. Like, it's definitely not a secret. This is served as a spy thriller about this woman Serena who works at MI5, which is the British Secret Service. And she is tasked with recruiting this male writer, but she ends up falling for him, and the two of them start a relationship kind of against the rules. My favorite trope of all time is spies in love, you know, and I think it adds extra spice if it is enemy spies in love, but you know, I was down for this. Unfortunately, it ended up being just straight up false advertisement. Allegedly. Thriller? There's nothing thrilling about it. Spy thriller? There's no spy work involved. Serena works at MI5, yes, but not as a spy. She is literally a typist. She's paid to type shit for them. When I tell you that watching paint dry would have been more interesting than reading this book, I want you to know that I 100% wholeheartedly mean it. The characters were uninteresting, the writing was dull, the plot was very boring. Serena was very clearly written by a man, and the book ends in such a cheap twist, oh my god. But the worst fault of this book by far, at least in my opinion, is that it thinks it's so fucking smart. There's a lot of discussions about and commentary on literature and what real literature is, as well as on the British Secret Service and its history, which, you know, would have been okay had it been well incorporated in the story, but spoiler alert, it wasn't. I think if you want to have, you know, commentary in your book about real life things, that's absolutely fine. But you have to either, 1, just write an essay, or 2, I'm so stressed out right now, or 2, incorporate it naturally in a fictional setting. Instead, in this, it just felt like every now and then the plot of the book would stop, just so McEwan could kind of insert his highbrow commentary slash essay slash lecture slash whatever you want to call it, which, you know, made for a very dull and boring reading experience. And the plot of the book wasn't even good in the first place, so I mean, come on, you have to give me at least one good thing to work with. Anyway, this book was a mess, and it seemed to me like Ian McEwan just wrote to hear himself talk, which, you know, it's 2021, I don't have the energy in me to go through that again. Okay, I don't need another man who just thinks they are too fucking smart for this world. I am done with wannabe geniuses.
Done.
Anyway, that's it for today. It took me like 2 to 3 hours to film this video, and it's not even that long, so I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you had fun with it. Have you read any of these books? And if you did, what did you think about them? Thank you so much for watching. Leave a like, comment and subscribe if you feel like it, and as always, I'll see you around.